When I have time today, I'll post the scholarship stuff. I meant to do that this last week, but I had gotten busy and forgot. So there were a few like last miles in the STEM scholarships. So I'll add it to the announcement so that way it expires and he doesn't have to deal with that later. If it comes. Okay, so we're gonna start unit 4 or chapter 4. And this chapter is pretty easy. It's just we're gonna go over relational operators and statements or expressions. And then we are gonna get into the if statements. I kind of stopped the exercises. I figured based on our pace from last time, ideally we should keep it like 4 to 5 exercises so that way you have a little bit more time to look at your program and then fix your program if you need to. And then I will try to post the video tonight or tomorrow. As soon as it gets ready after class, I have like an hour or so for office hours and I will get those uploaded. Okay, so in chapter 4, it begins with relational operators. And this is crucial when you deal with robotics or analytics, especially right now with all the data that we are ingesting into the system and be able to provide artificial intelligence decision-making process. So we have to, this chapter is important in that area. In the case that if that's what the direction you want to get into, because, all of the technology, the current technology is probably going to be around for a long time. So I try to keep everything on the document so that way you don't have to go to the PowerPoint. And I had borrowed some information from, famous website for C++, like Program Is and other things. So that way I usually do zero textbook. So I don't really use a textbook. A lot of the resources are abundantly available, but you can read the chapter and do the exercises in the book. Okay, so relational operators are going to use symbols. That's what we see in mathematics. And the output that you often see, the result, you're going to have Boolean results. And the computer understands that true is 1 and false is 0. So for example, today it rains, right? So when it rains outside, I use an umbrella and that's true, right? So you can have a certain condition to be used with the relational operators. A lot of the times we use this to compare values or data. Now, when you're using a double equal sign, that really means equal. A single equal sign mean is, right? Like when we say variable 1 is 5, right? So the equal sign, the double equal sign really meant that the values are equal to each other, okay? And then when you use an exclamation point and an equal sign, that means that it's not equal, okay? So you can use this for comparison. For example, I can look at something in variable 1 compared to variable 2 and see if it is equal or not equal. And that's really up to your direction on how you want your program to output. So if I have a value 5 in variable 1 and 10 in variable 2, right? And if I want to compare it as equal value, it's going to output 0 because that's false. 5 is not equal to 10. You can do something that is also greater. So we are going to do a program, for example, if you are 21 years and older. So we're going to do greater and equal, right? But you can also do something like senior citizen discount for your business application where you want to check to see if the people are 65 years and older, and you can give them some kind of discount for food, right? Travel, etc. Purchases, okay? You can also use less than sign, which is the arrow to the left, and greater is the arrow to the right. Now we can do a combination, so greater or equal to. So we will say greater or equal to. Like I said, if you are 21 years or older, we would use greater or equal to. Okay. And then we can have less than or equal to. So you can check for someone who is a minor, right? 18 years or less. So we can use less than or equal to. So in this example, you would see that it's using CMath for floating comparison. Now you can include specific header file or libraries in C++ to implement the functions or the components of that library. So you have IOStream for C in and C out. CMath, this is mostly for floating points comparison. So when you have a large decimal values for floats, you would be able to use CMath, or you can also implement other functions in CMath, like what we seen before. String is where we would use for string object. So anytime that you type it as string, ideally you should include string header, and then using namespace std, so you don't have to do std for each C in and C out. That's just too tedious. We put everything into the main function, so you would see that the first part of the program, we're comparing the integers. So you have num1 is the variable 1, the first variable, and it's initialized at 5. So this is an integer, whole number. Num2, which is the second variable, and you notice that I didn't have to type int for both when you're using a separator. So if you have the same type variable, you can keep it on one line like what we talked about before, and just make sure that you type the first variable and then follow that with the subsequent variable in the same type. So I have 5 and 10, and I want to compare. So I tell the program to output if the variable 1 is greater than variable 2, right? And give it a space. And we would have to compare the variable 1, num1 is equal to num2. Is that true or false, right? So this program is going to output, and you can copy and paste this and run it so you can see it's going to output true or false, okay? False is going to be 0, and true is going to be 1. Just how the compiler understands true or false. Then we also do the same thing for the second section, but in this case, we're using decimal points. So we have a double val that's initialized at 3.0, and then the second variable holds 3.0000001, right? It's slightly bigger. And sometime if you're doing a scientific type of programs, you would see that, out of the decimal points, those are significant. And that can be, looking at like the margin of errors for your results and so on. So that can be important in research or science. When you're looking at like medicine, diseases, vaccination, etc. So we want to see if the value in the first variable, is it less than or equal to val 2? And you can see that should be false. So when you are comparing using the relational operator, you need to put it in the parentheses, okay? We want to put it into parentheses so that way the compiler understands that it needs to operate that task. It needs to compare the value in those variable inside the parentheses, okay? And then we also check to see if the variable val1 is greater than or equal to val2. And you can do the same thing with character, type char, right? Why is this important? Sometimes we want to be able to look at, some type of text or character that is input. And we can use it to, for example, to do input validation, to check and make sure that the user is inputting the right thing. Like, Y for yes and N for no. So you can use it to compare, okay? And then you can check to see if the variable C1, the character A, is less than B. Now this is ASCII coded, so all the characters are converted to numerical value. And if you don't know, right, you can go to Google. Sorry, let me clear out my browser here. And then you simply search for ASCII table. This is important in programming because sometimes, right, when I teach low-level programming, the students, they have to take the value and then enter it into like a register, is like a variable. So when you type in your character, right, like a letter A, it would be translated to a certain numerical value, okay? So as you can see, if you look at this table, a lowercase a is 97 in your decimal, right? So the decimal value, it shows that it's 97. Let me zoom in a little bit. So if you look at a lowercase a, that's 97, right? And hexadecimal value is 61. Now the computer would take this value and convert it all into binary. So when you enter the letter A, the lowercase a, it takes the 97 in our counting number and convert it. Now in the program, we have a capital A that's equal to 65 in our number, okay? Now, if you look at the letter B, that's 66. It's one higher, right? So 65 compared to 66. So if you have the later letter in the alphabet, they are higher in value, right? Capital or lowercase, okay? Uppercase or lowercase. And the same thing with your symbols. If you look at the symbols down here, right? Now, ASCII is limited to these characters. If you use, Unicode or other type of encoding system, you actually have more character sets, wider sets. And this is what you see in programs that are in different languages, like Chinese and Japanese. They would use different encoding system to have a larger range of value for those characters, okay? So what you see is that if we're looking at the letters, hi, did you have questions?
Yes, I was gonna stand that way so you could see me.
Oh,
How has it been? The projector, your laptop?
oh, good. Yeah, well, I just came back. Last week was kind of cutting in and out, but so far so good. I see that I got a new cable.
Yeah, I put in a new cable, so I'm just kind of following up to see.
Yeah,
how
it's not cutting out so far, so it's perfect.
Okay, okay, let me know.
All
Send
right.
an email.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Mhm.
All right, let's get a follow up. Okay, so when you're using the characters, right, just keep in mind that it refers to ASCII table for the value for your character. So when you compare A to B, right, in your program, of course, B is bigger because it's later in the alphabet. Or if you compare A to G, right, G is going to be bigger because it's a higher value and it's later in the alphabet. That's how the compiler sees the values, right? And the same thing with your symbol, like a till, a pipe, and other characters that you would see that is not regularly used so much, but it might exist in other languages or in some type of text, okay? All right, so when we look at that and we look at our program, you would see that it would check, right, the value for capital A and the value for capital B, and inside the parentheses, it would check for to see if they are equal or one is less than the other. Now for the string, because it treats it as an entire object in the container, basically it is gonna look at the characters, right? First of all, the easiest way, a lot of the time, C compiler is going to reference the number of characters that are streaming in for that string. So as you see, banana has more characters than grapes. So automatically it can check and make sure that, it would show the result that banana is greater than grapes. So you can use this a lot of the time. We would use this in the case that we would check the data that the user input, or in the case that if you have a lot of data, you can clean up your data, and so on, right? Okay, so if you run the program, let me see. If you copy and paste that program into your online compiler or into Visual Studio, you can quickly run it. And what you see is it's going to show you the output 1 or 0. 1 for true and 0 is false, right? So we can check that. The when we see out, we would compare I wonder why it shows 5 is greater than 10. Okay, so the float part is true. Let me retype the symbol and see. Because it seems like, okay, so when we're checking num5, there's an error right here. It's true for the second part, which is well, it's false for the second part. That's right. But for the first part, I see. You see if I change it to something else. Yeah, that's kind of funky. This expression right here, right? 5 is not greater than 10 or 7, but it shows that it's true here. Let me num2. Okay, everything else is correct. Oh, I'm just looking at the wrong line. Yeah, so that's right. That's correct. So you can keep it on one line or not, right? So you can do it this way, where you have a comma after the first variable, and then you can remove the type for the second, like this. Okay, so false for both at the first check, the integers, and then the floating, the decimal points, it's true and false. And then the letters or the characters, it's true and false. And then the string, right? If we wanted to see grape, is it less than banana, right? As you can see that banana has more characters in that string. So that's false. And then it's not the same, so it's false. So we can use it to validate data that is entered. We can also use it to apply some conditions when we check. This is used quite a bit for business application. Okay, so let's do the next assignment together. We are going to write a C++ program, and we are going to prompt the user to enter 2 values. And we're going to compare the values, and we want to output it as Boolean values, like 0 and 1. And we want to prompt the user to enter 2 strings, and we want to compare those strings. So, oh, I just told her nothing is wrong, and she so I'll email. Spoke too soon. Yeah, I don't think it's a bulb issue. I think they just replaced the cable. I suspect that it might be a bulb issue. So hopefully it'll last through the session today and I'll have her go replace it because there's night class in here. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we are going to do exercise 1 together. The only difference between the example 1 and exercise 1 is you're gonna do 2 C in. You're gonna record the input. Okay. And so at the beginning, you can use the same, like you can use the same variable name, like for the integers, but you want, instead of initialize the value here, after the integers, you want to have them C in. Okay, I did the program, so let me pull it up and show you. Okay, so here's my program. Hopefully it doesn't cut out the next few minutes. So I have include IO stream at the top, include string, because we just need integer and string. Let me see if I can increase this to that size. All right. Then, using namespace std, that's a must at the top, and everything is in the main. So first, we are going to compare two numeric values. I just added the comment so you know which section I'm working on. And I have double value. So in the case that if they enter a decimal point, because if you just tell the user to enter a number, sometimes they enter a whole number, sometimes they enter a decimal number, unless you are clear about entering the type of number. So I just have double value 1 and val 2. And you can use integer, that's up to you. We want to prompt the user to enter the first number, and we want to store that number into value 1 variable. I'll move it over here. Then we are going to prompt the user to enter the second number. Can you have them enter multiple number? Yes, but you have to use array to put it into a container for a group of input. So I would store the value for the second input into value 2. And you can use num1, num2, whatever value variable name you like to put. So now I wanted to check to see if the values are equal, less than, or greater than, right? And this is a good chance for us to use expressions. And keep in mind, after NL, there's always going to be a semicolon. Don't forget the semicolon after each statement. Sorry. Okay. Then I wanted to see out bool alpha. Now, when you do a bool alpha, instead of outputting 0 or 1 like what we've seen in the last example, you are going to output true or false, right? For humans, that's probably ideal because they might not know what 0 or 1 means, right? Not everybody would know programming or Boolean values. So if you want to do cout bool alpha, that's good enough. And then we want to kind of be clear about whether the values are equal or not, right? So if you did it like the example program, it's a simplified way, but I just have more out text to display so that way my program is clear. So are the two numbers equal? We want to check to see if the value are the same, and remember, put them in the parentheses when you see out. And then we can do an end line following that. For the next line, I wanted to check to see if the first number, is it greater than the second number? So I can do value 1 greater than value 2 inside the parenthesis for the expression. Then on the next line, I have the third check to see if the first number less than the second number. And we want to use value 1 less than symbol, value 2, and end line. So as you do it, you would get used to putting these operators with the variable inside the parentheses so you can see, so that way the compiler can check the values for you. And then we would do the same thing with the string. So I have string str1 and str2. So I would tell the user to enter the first string, and you're not limiting them to any kind of number of characters, right? So we don't have to control that right now. And then the same thing for string 2. So we would ask them to enter the second string. And we want to be able to check, are the two strings identical? Are they equal? So if they type their name twice, right? Exactly. So upper letter and lowercase letter, as you know, is different, right? But if they type it exactly the same, then it would output true for equal, right? If one string is shorter than the other, that will be true for less than, right? If the first string is longer, then it will be greater. So you would use the same expression or the same operators as what you see in the last section for the number, but we just simply pass the variable for the string accordingly. And then lastly, return 0, and don't forget your closing brace. Okay? Sorry. Okay, we would then run the program, and then you would enter the numbers to test it, and then you would enter the string to test it. And you can screenshot that, right? You can use snip, click new, and drag from corner to corner and paste it to your document. And if you missed it at the beginning, I have updated the assignments that you have submitted. If you have outstanding work you want to turn it in, you can work on it and submit it, and I will update your grade. So it's a very simple program. The reason why you see that it's longer is because we just be more clear with the output that we have for the program, and you want to be clear So that way we're just not showing 0 or ones or true or false. We want to show like which case is true and which case is false. And that's important, right? So you can use this to analyze like daily sales, even inventory. You can use it to also, like for school application, we can check it for like GPA, like college, university application. They would have an app to be able to check if student qualify for scholarship, financial aid, or even getting accepted for transfer or to start at the university. So there are many applications that we can think about when we use these concepts. So as you do this, your chapter 4 programming challenge will get easier, right? It just reiterating the concept and applying it, you would see that it's going to get easier when you do some exercises in the book without even looking at the code. Okay, so after we run the program, we can screenshot it and add it to the document, so paste it. And then you can look at the next example. So we'll do that in a little bit. You need help, let me know. I'll come and help you in the case if something is not working. Now, because at this level, we are using everything output to the console, right? Your goal, if you want to be a developer, a game developer, is to be able to implement UI with your program. So when the user input, we want to have a field for them to type it in, and then they click submit, and that gets stored into the database or a storage location for your data. Like I mentioned before, if your program doesn't have all the things that C++ compiler needs, it will tell you the error for which line that you need to go and fix and look at that line. Sometimes it is in proximity, right? You know that sometimes it tells you certain line, but when you go there, you check everything's correct. So look above and below it and making sure, because the debugger, depending on the application itself, so some debugger are better than the other. So that should be another thing that you should consider when you are selecting an IDE. So, you leaving? Are you done? Okay, make sure you're caught up.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so we are working on exercise 1 in the programming exercises for this week, right? You would see that in unit 4 or chapter 4. And you can use the example or you can reference what I have written here. Another good debugger for you is your AI, right? Sometime if you get stuck and you have research and you're not sure why your program is not working or something is missing in your program and you can't find it, you can ask it. I know that there's different mode in different AI to be able to ask it to help you look. So we have to learn how to work with AI in programming, right? But instead of having it write for you, you can try and then have it check for you. Sorry, I will make sure it's not going to sleep. Okay, I'm gonna take it out of share. I'm gonna pause the video real quick. Give me a second. Yeah, so we want to be able to screenshot it and then provide it so that way I know that you did the program. You can save the program to your cloud space, or you can download it if you want to keep a record of it. Okay, and then you can run everything up in the online compiler. There are other online compilers that if you want to use, you can also use. I put another link there, but this one seems like it's easier to look at because it color codes. A lot of them color code for you, so you have options. Yeah.
Sorry. When using the online compiler, do we have to log in or does it really matter?
Yeah, so if you want to save your work, then you log in, right? But if you just want to do the current code only and download it, you don't have to log in, right? If you log in, you can click save and then give it a name and it will just store there until you delete it. Yeah. So if you want a record of it, like if you're working on a project, yeah, you want to save it. So you can use your Google account or other account to sync with it, but you don't have to. Sorry, it cuts off again. Okay. So hopefully she'll come back before we end. All right. Any question regarding exercise 1? So you can use the example, right? But the difference between our exercise and the example is that you have to add the cin. And in my program, I had used bool alpha for the cout. So it actually displayed true, the word true or the word false instead of 0 or 1. If you don't cout bool alpha, it will automatically default to Boolean values, which is going to be 0 or 1. 0 for false and 1 for true, like the example. Okay. Since we don't have any question regarding the last part, we can move forward. Is that okay? Okay, next we're going to use if statement. And if statement is crucial in nowadays. It helps with decision-making process in a lot of app, from online cart to, buying something like a car online. You can pick the color, you can specify certain things, or even criteria for qualifying for insurance. All of these things play of importance using conditional statements. So if statements are part of conditions, and you have to put the conditions that's evaluated into the parentheses. Okay. And for if statement, it would only check, it would execute the body of it if it is true. So like I said, if it rains outside, I would use an umbrella, right? The use umbrella would be inside the parentheses, right? And then, I'm sorry, if rain outside is inside the parentheses, and then use umbrella would be the body of the code. So in this example, you would see that we have the value number 5 is initialized for that variable. And the program is checking to see if the variable number is greater than 0. So that's true. It's going to execute whatever that's beneath it for the code. Okay. So you would follow up the condition with the curly brace. You have to give it its own code block. Okay. Whenever you see the curly brace, that just represents the body of that section of code block. So in the condition, it's going to check the condition, and whatever that's in the curly brace, the body of the code, it's going to execute. So you can take a look at the exam. Now, I'm sorry, on the right-hand side, you can see that if it's false, right? If the number is not less than 0, it's going to forget about whatever that's in the body of the code, and it's just going to go to the next part of your program. So it's going to jump to the outside of the curly brace, the outside of that block, it's going to go to the next section of your program, right? So if your program ends there, it's just going to end the program, right? Okay. So in the example 2, we are going to have the user enter a number, and we want to check to see if that number is greater than 0. If it is, then we want to display that it is a positive number. Now, there's another line. It says this statement always executes. So when that's true, right, it's going to display the positive integer, and then it's going to go to the next line of your code. So whether it's true or false, so when it's true, it's going to execute the code inside the curly brace and then go to the next line of your code. If it's false, it's going to skip whatever that's in the curly brace under the if statement, the body of the if, and it's going to go to the next line of your code. So when you run that, you can see, right, if I input the number, so let's go to my project and I can open up example 2. And I run this. So if I put in -4, right, you can use the negative number. So the -4 is not less than, is not greater than 0. So it's going to skip this line, this section of the if statement because it's not true, right? Only when it's true, then it's going to execute the body of the if. Then it's going to go to the rest of my program, which is, you know, the next line is this statement always execute. Now, if I run the program and I put in 24 positive, right? So 24 is greater than 0, so that checks true. So that means that it's going to branch here. It's going to move into this body of the code. So it says you have entered a positive integer number 24, and then it's going to continue with your program, right? So when you understand it in C++, it would be similar to other languages, right? It's just the syntax for the body is slightly different from one language to another. Even at low level, when I teach this in assembly, we have to branch it based on, you know, the positive condition of the numerical value that it checks. Okay. Any question? Okay, let's do the next exercise together. We're gonna create a program to ask the user to enter their age, right? We want to display the age that they have entered for exercise 2. So I put an algorithm for you already. So algorithm, some of you have submitted your assignment, I read, right? This is a procedure on how your program should flow, right? So before you write your program, you want to create a pseudocode. So a pseudocode has a list of steps that would give you an outline of your program pretty much. It's kind of like how you outline your essay, right? For English class, you kind of want to put down what you would put for introduction, for body and conclusion. So we want to create some kind of procedure for our program so we can understand like what to put in our program. So we know that we need to prompt the user to enter their age. So that means that we have to have a variable for age, and we're gonna C in for the input for that variable in main, right? Then we're gonna have to display, we're gonna have to do a C out of whatever they have entered as age. So we're gonna do a C out of the value they enter for the age. And then we're going to apply an if statement. We want to check to see if the age they have entered is greater or equal to 21. They can be 21, right? Greater or equal to 21. And then we want, if they are, right? If they are 21 years or older, we are going to output the text, you are 21 years or older. And you see this for like, products that require legal age for United States. The legal age for United States is 21. Other part of the world is a different number, right? But here we want to be able to check. Okay. And then you would test and run the program. So I put down the flow for your program. You kind of take this and you can add it as comments, and then you can just enter the section of your code. That will probably be ideal. So by practice, I would encourage you to break down your program into procedure like this, and then use this the step-by-step procedure to kind of fill in your code. That helps you kind of understand how your program will go. Okay. So let's see if you got started already. Okay, so my program is really simple. I have include IO stream from my header. And using namespace std. And you want to put everything in your main because you don't have your custom functions. So we're just going to use a built-in function for our language. So inside the main, we're going to have a variable called int age, and you can say user age, right? Whatever you like to name your variable. And then we want to prompt the user to enter their age. So cout, enter your age. And we are going to have the next line to have that input recorded into the variable. So we're going to store whatever that the user typed in into that variable called age. Then we want to display what the user have entered. So we want to say cout, you entered, and then we pass the variable, we bring that variable down age. And the only really added concept is the if statement. Remember that the condition needs to go inside the parentheses after the if keyword. So we have to say if age is greater or equal to 21. After the parentheses, you need to have the curly brace for your code block for that condition. We want to execute, right? After it checks true, we want to execute cout, you are 21 years or older. And that's it. Now, we don't have an else statement, that's to come later, right? But if you want to add an else, right? Else, then that would be a separate section. So we will talk about if else next. Very, very easy. I use the same program for my Java class and my Python class because everybody knows about this, right? So there's certain products that you would buy that requires verification of the age. Let's say you sell it online. And then sometime you would require for them to input, maybe like ID or driver license information. So that way it would validate that they are 21 years old. Rarely the case, but usually, it just asks. A quick way to check to see, right, if someone is 18 years or older, usually people who are 18 years or older would have a credit card number. So sometime that they would require you to input a credit card, but that's not always true, right? Now, if you look at insurance discount, sometimes they would only discount you if you're a certain age. And you can do this for like senior citizen discount too. You can check to see if someone is a certain age, so that way you can give them a discount, which we will work on down the line. So as you can see, we see how in this assignment we use your operators to compare, relational operators, and we apply the relational operators with our conditional statement, which is your if statement, right? And they go inside the parentheses. Following the parenthesis, remember your curly brace at the end of each of your statement, right? You would have a semicolon there. And then when you complete the program, return 0 and make sure you have the closing curly brace. If you put your cursor next to it, it will pair up the curly brace so you know which one matches with it. So if it's missing the curly brace, just put your cursor in the open curly brace and it would show you whether you have a closing curly brace. Oh, sorry. My projector is malfunctioning again, so I think they have to replace the bulb or the projector. It might be it's too hot. Kind of dim too. Okay, so you can run the program. You can test it with a number that is less than or the same 21 or older, right? You need help or have questions? So if you run it and if there's an error, check the line for the error so that way you can also use the debug function for the online compiler. But it usually just tells you where that is. Now, if you're familiar with Replit, I used to use Replit quite a bit, or REPL, right? Now they require a membership, and with the membership, there's AI incorporated. So if you want to program with AI integration, there are a lot of different platforms that you can use. A little tedious to set up. So for beginner students, sometimes that can be a lot when you have to do multiple steps just to get your program working. So this is okay. We only have 2 more programs to go to additional set of concept. And then we'll just answer the last question, which is summarize what you learned today, right? So as I mentioned, I will try to have the lab set up where we're only going to do a couple programs and then I'll get you started on the current chapter programming challenges. So in case you need help, I can help you on Thursday, right? So we'll cover the concept for Thursday and then we will work on programming challenges on Thursday. Okay, so you can run the program, right? Move my little, so let's say if I put 38, right? And it should tell me that I am you are 21 years or older. Now we can do more with that, right? We can have more, we can say if age is greater than 21, display that you are older than 21. If age is equal to 21, they are 21 years old. If age is less than 21, that will go into the else statement. Else, right, you're under 21. So we can expand this program to be a little bit more intuitive, more effective for the user. But you get the point when we just applying the if here. It checks if this is true, it executes this. Okay. If it's not true, let's test it with where it's not true. So if I put in 17, right? It just tells me that I'm 17 years old. That's it. Right? I'm not older than 21. So at this point, we can do something else with it, like you're underage, you cannot buy this product, you're underage, you cannot use this service, etc. Not that we're discriminating people who are under 21, but it's just the legal age for United States. Okay, any question regarding exercise 2? Easy peasy. Okay, so now we're going to do an if-else statement. So again, it's going to check your condition inside the parentheses. The only difference between the if and the if-else is you add the keyword else. And whenever that you add the else, you're going to add the curly brace for its code block. Okay, so this is the way that we write if-else. And you can have if else inside if else, and we're going to touch on that next, or the next if first, and then on Thursday we'll talk about that. Now you don't want to bury things too deep, that way the program will be slower. So in this case, we only have the if the condition is true, then it's going to execute whatever the code beneath it. Otherwise, it's going to go to the else and it's going to execute the else. Right? So if they entered in the last exercise, if they entered 17 because they are underage, we should say that they are under 21 years old in the else statement. Okay? All right. So if it's false, then it's going to execute the else body. As you can see that there. Okay, so the example here is your positive integers again. I like to use that because it's easy to kind of look at. Okay, so in the example program, we ask the user to enter a whole number, which is integer. We record the input into a variable called number. And we check to see if that number is greater or equal to 0. If it is, then we would say that they have entered a positive integer and displayed that value. If it's not, we would have an else statement. We would say that they have entered a negative number. So if we test this program, oops, sorry, trying to. Oh, sorry, I have missed my closing curly brace. Okay, so if I put in negatives, thank you, but no, -7, right? And you can see that it says it execute the else, right? Because it's a negative number, it's less than, so this doesn't check true. It's not checking true here. It's gonna skip this part and it's gonna go to the else statement. So remember, if it only execute if that's true, the condition is true. So if it's not true, it's going to skip this line and it's going to go to the else and it's going to execute the else. Okay. Okay, so let's do you have any question regarding that example? I used a similar exercise because I was writing this last night. I'm like, well, I did this for Python and Java. We'll just use the same thing. So, gourmetcoffee.com sells bulk coffee beans for $12.99 per pound. Customers can get 10% discount when they purchase 5 or more pounds of coffee. Write a C++ program to perform the following task. And I have the procedure for you, right? So if you interview for a job and they give you a problem like this, right? First thing you need to do is write down the steps that for the flow of my program, right? Pseudocode your program. And you don't have to be very thorough. So I tell my students, when you pseudocode, kind of outline it to how you want your program to go from the beginning. So first, we want to prompt, and I will spend a little bit more time on how you can properly do pseudocode because I get a lot of students don't know how to do it. Okay. Prompt the customer to enter the amount of coffee that you want to purchase. Maybe a C out, right? How many pounds of coffee do you want to buy? And then the C in, it needs to store it into a variable for coffee or purchase coffee or whatever. Then we are going to use that variable to check to see if it is greater than 5 pounds, right? If it is, then we can give them a discount, right? We want to show how much money they're going to spend for the amount of coffee that they're going to buy. Else, right, we're just going to charge them whole price. Okay? So we want to calculate the purchase price. And this is common, right? Okay. So I will help you. Where's my coffee program? Okay. Okay. So in this program, we are going to do a constant variable. And I might have not mentioned this in the earlier part, but maybe Mr. McCreed had. So when you have a fixed value like this, $12.99, like a price, you should, because it's a number, right? You should make it a constant. It doesn't change. Okay. Like that's the price that's set for that product. And because it has decimal point, we want to use double instead of int because int is for whole number. And I have a variable called price per pound. Okay. Now we are going to have the user to input the number of pounds that they're going to buy, right? And we are going to calculate the total price. So I would have 3 variables. I have one for the price, which is a constant double type, and that's price per pound. The second variable is going to record the input for the user when they specify how many pounds of coffee they're going to buy. And the third variable, it's also type double. That's going to be the price that we're going to calculate. That's technically a subtotal because we probably have to charge them for tax and shipping, right? But you get the idea. We don't want to expand the program too long, okay? Now, notice that at the top, I also include IO manip, using IO manipulators. We talked about that last chapter because when you do the calculation, you want to control the decimal point to 2 decimal points so that way we can have dollars and cents. Please work. Okay. So the first step is to prompt the user to enter the amount of coffee that they want to buy in pounds. You want to say specific so that way they know, right? in the another part of the world, we want to say in kilograms, for example. Or if you sell it like, in pine or whatever, you need to specify the unit so that way they know. And once I have the prompt, I'm gonna have a CIN, remember CIN arrow to the right, and I'm gonna record the input into the variable pounds. The next step, we want to check to see if how many pounds, if the pounds that they have entered is greater or equal to 5, right? That's going to give them the discount is 5 or higher. So we want to check to see if the value is, and you don't have to put all the comments. I only put the comments so you know what's going on. So if pounds is greater or equal to 5, and remember, right, we want to put that inside the parentheses. Following the parentheses is your curly brace. Then we would apply the discount, 10%. So this is a little bit of math, right? So if I subtract, so you can take everything calculated by the multiplication and subtract the 10%, or you can just do the 90%. So they're only paying for 90% of the cost, okay? So that's like a quicker way to do it. Instead of doing additional step with addition and subtraction, we are going to have the total price is price per pound times the pounds and multiply it by 0.90 for the 90% of the price they paid. It already deducted the 10%, right? Because 10 plus 90 is going to give you 100%. So we're giving them the discount if they buy 5 or more pounds. So we want to say that the 10% discount is applied. We gave them the 10% discount. Else, right, we would calculate the total price without the discount. So we would take price per pound times pounds and display it. Now the bottom part you can see, let me move this so it's not blocking. That we have the set precision, that's when we need the IO manipulators. We saw this in the last week exercise, the lab exercise. You're gonna use the fix function and the set precision function. And we're gonna pass, the parameter is gonna be 2 for 2 decimal points. So because in United States, we use dollars and cents, so we would need to specify the decimal point here. But if you create a program for other countries who don't have the cents or decimal points in their monetary value, then you can use integers or, but so here we would set the position so that way we would bring down the total price. So if they got a discount, it's still gonna bring down the total price. It's gonna execute line 32 and 33 regardless. Okay? Regardless of the condition is true or not. So we're still gonna show the price regardless. So total purchase price is now it's up to the developer. You can show no discount, right? In the L statement for C out. Sometimes that can perceive as a negative thing for the customer, but that's up to you. And then don't forget the return 0 and the curly brace at the end. You don't have to do it exactly like this, right? So I just want to give you a general idea on how to approach a program like this. Can I do it other ways? Sure. We can also calculate out the discount amount, show them how much money that they save, and then subtract that from your total price if they're receiving a discount. So your algorithm can be similar. So if you have like a business, sometimes you would do a program like this, right? To be able to provide your customer option to use an app to make a quick purchase. And most apps are web apps because that way it's easy to find and it's easy to maintain. If you want to create native apps in C++, you can. Any questions? You need any help? So in this program, it's different than the previous exercise that we're using else statement. So it's more whole, it's more complete. Otherwise, you're just gonna have like a shorter program that doesn't really have more details for the customer. So we can check all the curly braces, the semicolon, right? Making sure your variable names are the same. When you name it a certain way, you're gonna make sure you use it. And then, so check your syntax if you're running into errors. Okay, so after this one, we only have one more set of concept and one more program, and that's it, right? I think time goes by quicker when you're learning and you're applying and you're doing something. Okay, so you can test the program if you completed it. You can put in the number of pounds that you want. So first you should check to see if the discount is applied. Like you can put in 10 pounds, 15 pounds, whatever you like. And then you can run it again and check it. If you buy 3 pounds, right, you don't get a discount, but you would get the total price. In my Python class, I actually make them do the shipping, the tax, and the shipping is, sometimes you have to calculate it based on your zip code and all of those things. So that can be added components to your program. Okay, so test your program. Yeah.
This one have the I.
Yeah, you have IO manip at the top. It has to because of the fix and the set precision, so you can put it after include IO stream. So it's IO manip. Yeah, if you're using set precision and fix, you have to have IO manip at the top. Any question? Just want to make sure I have recording. Sometime I forget to press start again. Okay. So you kind of see now you have more of the complete detail programs, right? And then as you come along, you're gonna have more. So in future classes like data structure, sometime that they would give you the foundation of the program, or you would write it and then you would modify and edit it. So it becomes of like a more of a project base. So that's like what you normally work in team and development. You would start to build your program and we would build the bone of the program, and then we can start adding modules and things to the program to make it a package. So I can have another file for C++ to be running with this file to calculate the tax and the shipping. So that way I don't have to change my entire main program. And you can include it in like how you would with the libraries. So you can make your own file, header file, and add it. Okay, so screenshot, code, and output. Test your program to see if the discount is applied. Any question regarding exercise 3 and part C? No, we're okay. Okay. There's snacks up front if you're hungry. Okay, last part and last exercise for the day. Okay. But keep in mind that there's a small little question at the end. So make sure that when you complete the last section, go through and answer the last. So I just want you to take a moment to put what you have learned. Maybe for those of you who have learned how to program before, this is probably just review, but you can just put down what you have reviewed. That's okay. Okay. So this is a program to check the condition for voting, and we are going to talk about nested if statement. So you can have an if nested inside an if. We want to indent. C++ doesn't require indentation, but you want to indent for code visibility and aesthetic. So you want to indent the second if from the first if. And when you nested the if, it's going to test the condition, the first condition. If that's true, it's going to execute the code following it. If it's not true, and then it's going to check the second condition, and if that's also true, then it's going to execute it. So I put a comment here. It says code run if both conditions are true. So for example, we would say if it's rain outside, we would wear a coat, right? The book used that example. If it's cold outside, right, we would also wear a coat. So in the case that if it's rain and cold outside, it's going to execute this part. We are going to wear a coat. So the inside if has to, it's going to execute if only both the conditions are true. It's going to check condition 1 and condition 2. Now, sometimes students bury their if too deeply and they tell me why they don't know why it's not working is because the most inner if all the conditions are not met, it won't execute, right? And you don't want it like 10 if ins. You don't want to nest it 10 times. It's just not ideal and not efficient. There are other ways to solve the problem. But you see this with data analytics and decision making all the time, right? It has to check data, it has to check to see if the data meets the condition to be able to give you the decision that you want. Okay, so the example 4, you have a variable for age that's 20 or 21 or 18. You have the bool type for citizen. So we want to check to see if they are a citizen and they are at a certain age to be able to vote. Now, the user age is 20, and we want to check to see if that is greater or equal to 18. If it is, they are old enough to vote. We also want to check to see if the user is the citizen or not to vote, right? So this inner if, it's going to check citizenship and the age condition, right? Otherwise, they cannot vote, right? We would have an else there. It would only make sense if you have an else with your if. Yes, you can have a nested if without an else, but it's just not a complete program, okay? And then we would have the return 0 and the closing braces. Okay, let's talk about number 4. Cheapinsurance.com gives $100 discount per year to drivers who are veterans or military members with 5 or more years experience of driving. To write a program to perform the following tasks. Okay, so here's the outline. Prompt the user to verify if they are a veteran or military member. So you can say, see out, are you a military member or a veteran? And then we would have a variable to store their input, right? Prompt the user to enter the number of years they've been driving. And then we want to check if the information entered meets the criteria for $100 discount with the nested if statement. You can also do nested if with else. And then we want to display the message if the user, to the user whether they qualify for the discount or not. Okay. And I try to use real case scenarios, so. I have the program. Okay. So we are going to have the header IO stream and the string. That's easy, right? And you don't have to follow this exactly. I'm just giving you my version of it. You can solve it however you like. And then using namespace std. In the main, I am going to initialize 2 variables. These are the 2 components that we need to use to check, right? If they are a veteran or not, and if they have number of years of driving, that's going to meet the criteria. Now, some of you want to do yes or no as Y or N. You can do a char with this, but I see a lot of my students do it that way. So I want them to be able to type out yes or no, okay? And this program actually have additional operators that we will be covering on Thursday, but I want to give you some preview to some of the concept. So these two variables gonna store the input. So we're gonna see out, we're gonna display, we're gonna prompt the user to verify if they're a veteran or military member. We can say, are you a veteran or a military member? And we want to show them how to type the answer, okay? Because people might type Y for yes, N for no, right? If you want lowercase, put lowercase. I'm particular about like instruction on program in my project for my classes. Because, you know, sometimes students just assume that the user knows, the user doesn't know, right? The cleaner your data, the better your life is going to be down the line as developers. So we want to, so I put down yes or no lowercase. And in the case they type uppercase, we want to validate that. We want to input validate. We want to check it and convert it. So you're going to see that in the next section. So here we would say CN is a veteran. Yes or no, right? So whatever they type, no, then we would branch it in the next part. We also want to prompt them to enter the number of years they've been driving. And we want to say CN years of driving. So those are the two criteria we want to use to check if they get a discount or not. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we are going to control how they type in their answer. As you know, people would be creative and they would type different yes or no, right? So for the if condition, I want to check to see if they answer yes with the lowercase or yes with the capital Y or yes with all capital. Okay. So when you're using a double pipe, and this key is you're going to press shift, it's above your enter key. This is an OR operator. It's a logical operator that we can use to check the condition. Now the OR operator, it's only going to check if one of the three cases is true. Okay. So if they type it one way out of the three, that's going to meet the condition criteria. And then we're going to nest the second if for the years of driving is 5 or greater. Then we want to display, congratulations, you qualify for $100 insurance discount. And you're going to do an end line semicolon. Else, you can say that they are a veteran, but they need 5 or more years of experience in driving. They might be a new driver. Let me pull this to the right a little more. Or I can shrink it down a little bit. So just the text, quotation, right, arrow, and line. So however you want your message to go, I just put else, right? Sorry. So I have 2 if and I have 2 else. So this is a nested if else. So I would do if, right? They meet the veteran criteria, but they also need the years of driving. You can also solve this without having a nested if with the and operator. That would just be an if else statement. So we can condense this code by using an and operator. But anyway, if they meet the 5 years or more experience, right? Because it checks for both condition in the nested if here. And we want to say, congratulations, you qualify for a discount. Else, we have an inner else, you are a veteran, but you need 5 or more years of driving experience to qualify for the discount. And then else, sorry, right? You must be a veteran with 5 years of driving experience to get a discount. So you have a nested if else. And the inner else here, sometimes that's hard to understand. It's actually is that the years of driving is not true, but the outer might be true. The outer is true. So they are a veteran, but they need the years of driving. So we saw that the or operator here, and you can see that, you use the double equal sign to check for the yes and how they type yes, right? So if you have things like no, right, you also have to check for that too. This is a process for it. It's called input validation, making sure that whatever they input, right, we would yield the same outcome. We would get the program to move to the next condition to check. Now, if you don't have some of this, sometimes it actually halts your program if they input something else that is not, no. But you can also have other loops implemented too. We'll talk about other loops in a future week. So as you do these, when you do the programming challenges, right, they are similar. So just see in, see out, and then you would have if statements for chapter 4. If else. Now, if you decide to solve the other way, right, we can combine the if else statement and you can use logical operator. We'll do another example in the future for that. So yeah, I can clean this up a little bit more and make the program not as lengthy, not as many conditions, because when you branch like this with a lot of conditions, they are actually processes that your computer has to evaluate, right? So we want to be concise as much as possible. I did something similar in my discrete class. I think I used a similar example because they have to learn logical operators and, so too. Before you go, give me your name so I can enter your attendance. And sorry. Okay. Sandra. Okay. Any questions? Sorry. It's doing that again. I was like, it's near the end. Let me pause the recording. The record.